I would like to start off by saying, please don't sue me, Disney. Yes, Disney, those family-friendly, wholesome, mercantile toy commercials. I mean, motion pictures. Whilst Disney ostensibly had a PG reputation marketed towards the cis, heteronormative, Boy Scout white majority of mid-20th century America, this company is no stranger to controversy. Today, in particular, I'd like to start off by saying, again, Walt Disney was a bit of a dick to women. No surprise there, given the time period. In this series, we're going to explore the many failings of Walt Disney, the man, and his company. I'm your host, Paris. This is Down the Rabbit Hole. Let's get into it. Our story oddly starts with Meryl Streep, as many good ones do. During the National Board of Review Awards ceremony in 2014, our girl Meryl Streep called the historical main character, Walt Disney, a gender bigot. To prove a point, Streep read from a 1938 rejection letter written by Walt Disney. It was written to a lady job applicant who was seeking work in animation. But before we get to that letter, let's get some exposition. Let's face it, America and the world at large were full of backward jobberknolls. Still is. But unlike our illustrious and progressive, roaring 2020s of today, women did not have the formal legal protections in the workplace, and if we're not careful, we might lose the few that we still have. Between the 1920s and the 1960s, Disney Studios was a segregated workplace. In more ways than one, but that's for another time. In which a majority of the women were employed in the ink and paint department, populated almost entirely by conventionally attractive women under the age of 30. The department was jokingly nicknamed the nunnery. The ink and paint girls were responsible for the skillful job of tracing and tinting the transparent cells which made up every frame on screen. The department was jokingly nicknamed the nunnery. Great. Men in entertainment were always creepy. Wonderful. Women who wore gowns and gloves to keep the cells free from grease or lint. Although crucial, this work was low in the studio hierarchy, underpaid and often thankless. Of the 150 ink and paint women who worked on Snow White, only a tiny proportion were invited to the film's premiere and were not given on-screen credit. Nonetheless, even within the restrictive boundaries of the department, the women could make their own permanent mark. Ink and paint employee Mary Louise Weiser patented the first grease pencil whilst working on Pinocchio in 1940. This is used to make drawing on cellulose easier. Her invention became an essential tool in 1950s aviation, used in air traffic control centers to mark the route of aircraft on glass. Women actually applied for jobs outside the ink and paint department, like animation, camera, or the storyboard departments, and were rejected, and thus referred to the ink and paint department. Let's face it, the ink and paint department was a relatively low-status department at both Disney and other animation studios. They often referred to these women as girls, and the majority of upper-level animators were blokes, and naturally, it was unfair. Surprisingly, the women artists who worked at Disney in the early days were mainly story artists, like Bianca Majoli, the first woman to be hired by Disney's story department in 1934. But before we get too excited, nepotism. Bianca Majoli attended the same high school as Walt Disney. He even doodled in her yearbook. They went their separate ways, both continuing their respective careers in the arts, until one day she saw one of Walt's shorts and realized the success he had achieved. So, she wrote a letter. He liked her portfolio and got employed. Remember, you could overcome sexism if you met your employer in high school. This is not to take from her talent, of course. Walt, of course, still treated her like dog shite, paying her less than 1/5 of what her male counterparts made. She made $18 a week. The dudes, on the other hand, $100 a week. Yay, token white lady. She was known to skip as many story meetings as possible because they were often humiliating. Majoli recalled one instance when Walt unprofessionally embarrassed Majoli in front of the team. When she left the room, a group of male writers chased her to her office, banging on the door. Majoli cowered inside as the men broke down the door to further ridicule her. She was born in Italy and fluent in the language. She even translated the original Pinocchio to English so that the studio could adopt it. Majoli only worked for Disney for a few years, unfortunately. In 1940, she went on an extended vacation. Upon her return, she found that her desk had been cleared out and her position had been filled. How thoughtful and enlightened of Walt. In 1936, Walt Disney hired Grace Huntington. She was an accomplished pilot, but unable to serve in the military because of her gender. Huntington recalled her first storyboard department meeting, when a security guard would not allow her in the room because she was a woman. He told her that women were only part of the ink and paint departments. Yes, the discount mall cop was passing judgment on others, and has airs above his station, clearly. Eventually, she was able to get inside, and when her colleague saw her, Grace recalled Walt Disney telling her, "You know, I don't like to hire a woman in the story department. In the first place, it takes years to train a good storyman. Then the storyman turns out to be a story girl. The chances are 10 to 1 that she will marry and leave the studio high and dry, with all the money that had been spent on her training gone to waste, and there will be nothing to show for it." By contrast, the training period for inkers, painters, and stenographers was relatively short, so if these women left the company to get married, not much would be lost, in theory. Nevertheless, since Disney really valued real talent, Huntington was still hired, and soon others followed, like Dorothy Ann Blank and Retta Scott, who joined the story department in 1936 and 1938, respectively. The first female animator at Disney was hired some time later. Story artist Retta Scott was working on Bambi 1942 when her male colleague saw her amazing drawings of hunting dogs. Very impressed by Scott's work, Uncle Walt then allowed her to do her own animations. Scott was tutored by animator Eric Larson, and soon other women were being trained as well. In a company speech from February 1941, Disney acknowledged the importance of women in creative jobs, and explained why they were being trained. One of the reasons being World War II. So I guess there is some nuance on the topic. The man recognized talent and would push through some of the boneheaded attitudes of the time to promote particularly talented individuals regardless of demographic, and obviously putting ahead people he personally liked. And with America possibly joining the war, Disney realized he simply needed women artists in order to keep his business going. So, there was obviously the financial incentive. Whatever works for progression, I guess. A la Uncle Walt, I believe that if there is to be a business for these young men to come back to after the war, it must be maintained during the war. Some of the talented women who had started in the inking and painting department were trained to be animators. I believe that if there's to be a business for these young men to come back to after the war, it must be maintained during the war. The girls can help here. Some of the talented women who had started in the inking and painting department were trained to be animators, among them Mildred Rossi and Virginia Fleener. Good for them. Stick it to the mouse. Other talented women who were hired by Disney include previously mentioned friend, Mary Weiser, master chemist who established the Walt Disney Studios Paint Lab in 1935, Sylvia Holland, storyboard artist who was especially known for her work on the 1940 film Fantasia, and perhaps the most influential of Disney's lady artists, Mary Blair, art supervisor and color stylist for films like Cinderella, 1950, Alice in Wonderland, 1951, and Peter Pan, 1953. It's clear that, especially in the early days, Disney was not at all eager to hire women in creative jobs. There were exceptions, of course, but these women either had luck or enormous talent. He claimed he didn't want to lose his investment once women left the company to start a family. He also claimed he was worried that women wouldn't survive in a male-dominated workplace. According to our homegirl, Grace Huntington, she had this interaction with Disney in March 1936. It is difficult for a woman to fit in this work. The men will resent you. If you are easily shocked or hurt, it is just going to be bad. To be fair, the men did bully the women, and Walt just kinda allowed it. Family values, of course. Female artists indeed had a lot to put up with, working in a mostly hostile, male-dominated environment, while not receiving the recognition that they deserved. The top floor of Disney's purpose-built studio complex included the Penthouse Club, an exclusive men-only members club that comprised of a steam room, billiard tables, terraces for nude sunbathing, and walls festooned with murals of naked women. Healthy work environment, I think. If a woman can do the work as well, she is worth as much as a man, Disney had said in his 1941 speech to his employees. Girl artists have the right to expect the same chances for advancement as the men, and I honestly believe that they may eventually contribute something to this business that men never would or could. Note how he calls them girls and refers to the fellas as men. He says the quiet part out loud with his language. Now back to the National Board of Review Awards show in New York with Meryl Streep in the 2010s. Meryl Streep had read the following letter, which I will read myself right now. It was originally written in 1938 and addressed to Mary Ford, an aspiring artist. Another rejection letter, almost identical to Frances Bowen, another lady artist, was sent in 1939. Both letters were signed by Mary Cleave, containing a standard text that was taken from the Disney Policy Handbook. It is assumed that the rejection letters shown were used as a template to reject or divert female artists. It's not great, Walt. The only copies to be found online are these from the late 1930s. Dear Miss Ford, your letter of recent date has been received in the inking and paint department. For reply. Women do not do any of the creative work in connection with preparing the cartoons for the screen, as that work is performed entirely by young men. For this reason, girls are not considered for the training school. The only work open to women consists of tracing the characters on clear celluloid sheets with India ink and filling the tracings on the reverse side with paint according to the directions. In order to apply for a position as inker or painter, it is necessary that one appear at the studio, bringing samples of pen and ink and watercolor work. It would not be advisable to come to Hollywood with the above specifically in view, as there are really very few openings in comparison with the number of girls who apply. Yours very truly, Walt Disney Productions. By Mary Cleave. Now, it must be said, this video really should be called Walt is Sexist Against White Women, because women of color are largely absent from the early Disney animation story. It's always important to include other women, who are often forgotten in the conversation. Black men and Asian men worked at Disney during these early days, but for the most part, black women and other non-white women were largely excluded from animation until after Walt died. There's no bones about it, it was a white male-dominated workplace. Even if Walt was chill sometimes, he and the animators who looked like him liked to remind everyone else of this fact.